Hello, hi. Okay, so this is chapter 9. All right. Okay, so chapter 9 is we are going to learn on solid waste, or we call it as when I talk about solid waste, is more about all the waste that you created. Let's say like every day you have your kitchen waste from your kitchens, all your food waste, your paper, and then your aluminum tin cans or anything, okay? As long as some things that you don't want, all right? But it doesn't mean that it's some things that didn't have the values, but then it's only some things that you don't want, right? Okay, so here, this is our, right? So today's I use a new methods. You can see me anywhere. Okay, right? So today our learning outcome here is on, we have ClO2, ClO3, and ClO4. So first you have to learn how to explain, and then second, you know what is the current issue. Thirdly, you know how to discuss, how can we solve it, okay? Right, so next, don't feel is good. Let me change. Okay, right. So now you can see on this, what is the definitions for the solid waste? Why we say it as a solid waste is actually in Malay we call it as a sisa perpejal. Okay, something that in a solid base, but then is some things that you don't want, right? So the waste arising from humans and animals activity that are normally solid and that are discarded as useless or unwanted. And then commonly there are three categories of the solid waste. So I'm using a short forms for SW. Okay, so there are three types or three categories. First is the municipal solid waste. Second is the hazardous waste. And then thirdly is the industrial waste. Okay, so when we say about the industrial waste, then you can see from here. Okay, so you can see from hills is that the generally how does what is the compositions of the solid waste. Okay, so when you buy some things, you need to know the contents, right? So these are also the same. We have to know, okay, when we will say, when I talk about solid waste, I'm sure all of you usually you will think about it about recyclings, that the most commonly. Okay, so when you would like to recycle, how you decide which types to recycle. So in a bag of your rubbish that usually when you throw outside your house, I'm sure it have a lots of things. It won't be only have once only for kitchen waste, such as the fish bone, the bone from the meats, or those vegetables that maybe is not beautiful animals. Okay, so I'm sure that's not happening. So we need to know in one bag of the of the rubbish that you throw into the dustbin, we have which kind of the compositions. So usually for generalists, we can see the most highest percentage by the weight is actually the organic waste, which is from the fish bones, from your food. Those we say it as biodegradables. So all of these mainly you can see from here, we have 32% is coming from the organics, and then 29%, 29.5, which is almost 30% also is actually come from the paper. But then I'm sure nowadays, because of the recycling's been well educated, and then all the awareness been given to all of us, so The papers nowadays, people will keep it up. So we've been reduced one thing. If you check on this, all of this is some things that we dump into our landfill. So if we didn't know how to separate it, what will happen to our landfill? Our landfills will be over spill. Okay. So generally, if the times when we would like to do the experiments, we will take the samples about 200 kilograms. So we will go to the site and ask the lorries that after the lorries been collect those rubbish from your house, they will send to the landfill. So we will do it at the landfills. So we will ask them to unload all those solid waste, about 200 kilograms, and then we will separate one by ones, okay, by categories, organics, textile, all these things. We will separate it and then we weigh it and calculate. So we receive the waste compositions, right? So these are the characteristic and the composition of the solid waste. So from here you can see we have domestic, combustible, non-combustible, ash, construction waste, industrial waste, and also hazardous waste. Okay, these all of these you can actually read by yourself. I'm not going to go in deep for the explanations. Okay, so as previously we've been mentioned, there are three types of the municipal waste that is majors. Okay, so first is the municipal waste. When we say about municipal waste, is some things that comes from our house. It's more generalist. Hazardous waste is the waste that might be pose a substantial dangers to earth or plants or animals, any living organism, right? So the third one is the industrial waste. So it's usually the waste that comes from the industrial activities. Okay, right. So here, this is the classifications for municipal solid waste. So the number first one is the food waste coming from all of us. And then we have the rubbish, some things that we can be recycled and having the value, we call it as a rubbish. But then if some things that no valuables, we call it as a garbage. So these are the difference when you say this is garbage or this is rubbish. So there are different meanings. And then we have ash, demolitions and construction waste, and then we have some special waste, some things like the sweeping, roadside litters, or debris, dead animals, abandoned vehicles, okay? And then finally, there are treatment plants, which is coming from our wastewater treatment plant or water treatment plant. So it's something we call it as a sludge, right? So you can see here, when we say about food waste, it include the animals, fruit, vegetables, resulting from handling, preparations, cooking, and eating food. Because food waste are pre-traceables, they will decompose rapidly, especially during the warm weathers. Okay, right. So the next one is the generally where the municipal solid waste coming from. So first coming from the residentials, which is coming from our house. Secondly, from the commercials, when you go to restaurants, you eat at the restaurants. So we have this. Thirdly is the open area, some things that open on the street. So we have the trees. So the leaf from the street, from the trees, and then from our car parks, playgrounds, all those beach. Okay, and then finally is a treatment plant site coming from the water, wastewater, and industry treatment process. Okay, so when we have solid waste, so when we would like to manage, we call it as a solid waste management. How are we going to manage, and then what is solid waste management? So solid waste management is the applications of the technique that we would like to ensure the smooth executions of the functional events such as the collections, processing, and disposal of our solid waste. Okay, solid waste also, it may call it as a refuse. So there are the difference term between for the UK and also US. But then mainly in Malaysia, we call it as a solid waste. But then for US, we call it as a refuse. And then the book reference that I use is from US, so it used refuse. So in my lecture notes, it might be having a solid waste or refuse. So both of these are the same. And then when we say as a garbage, okay, so it's usually mentions to the food waste, or we say it as an organic material, some things that we can, it can decompose. Okay, so when we say a rubbish, so it's some things that combustible or non-combustible. So example is some things that can be recycled. So there are paper, glass, or wood waste. So next time, if you would like to scold somebody, don't call them as a rubbish, because rubbish in the terms of the solid waste is something that valuable. Paper, we can sell it. Glass or even aluminum can is all something that very valuable. Okay. So finally is the ash. Ash is something that after burning, so it's a very fine particle, usually in the color of white or black. Okay, so these are the process, or we call it as the relationships that we have in the solid waste management. What kind of elements or terms that we have in the solid waste management? So it's very simple. Okay, so first the waste generations, which mean from us, those who generate the waste, okay, where the waste coming. And then after we generate, we have to store it. We put it in our dustbin, so we storage. And then those storage, no matter is the small one inside your house or outside your house, is a storage thing. Okay. And then people will come and collect. So you have the collections, the third one. Okay. After the collections, we will go into two different process. There are three. So after the collection, sometimes the trucks that come and collects will directly go to the landfill. So it's a direct disposal. Some countries, they have, or some places such as in Kedah, we didn't have, but then in Penang, yes, we have the transfer stations. So after they collect those rubbish or those solid waste, they have to send to the transfer stations, because the distance from the place that they collect until the landfills are too far. So they need to have one center which collect all those from this area, and then they will combine it into a bigger truck, and then they send to the landfill. Okay. Lastly, we have the processing and recovery, which means after they collect, they will send to a place and do the separations. So they will separate out, and then those can be sealed, they will keep it, and then those really need to send to the landfill, only they send to the landfill. Okay. And then only any house, the finished ones will go to the disposal, which is our landfill. Right. So this is how the implementations on the integrate waste management for management the residential solid waste. So this is only for your general ideas. You can look into it and then you can ask later. Okay. So for the waste management hierarchies, which is in the pyramids, okay, so when we talk about solid waste management, what is the first thing that comes into your mind? I'm sure you will say, okay, we have to recycle. But that's actually, when we talk about recycle, if you remember the recycling's concept or recycling's slogans, we always mention it as 3R, which means reduce, reuse, and recycle. In 3R, recycle is actually the last. The first thing that we need to do is actually to reduce. How to reduce the waste? We need to reduce the generations. We need to reduce to create the waste. Okay. So if in the hierarchies, you can see the first one will be the prevent. Prevent creations of waste or reduce the amount that generated. Secondly, we are going to reduce the toxicity or negative impact of the waste. Thirdly, we need to reuse in their current form the materials recovered from the waste stream. Thirdly is recycles, compose or recover the material for use as a direct or indirect input to a new product. And then we need to recover the energies by the incinerations. reduce the volume of the waste before we go to the disposal, and then finally is dispose the waste in an environmentally sound manner. Okay, first we have to prevent how to create the waste. Okay, second we have to reduce the toxicity. So as examples, now everybody's, if you go to your the shopping malls, we will ask you to pay for the plastic bag. So we would like to ask you to prevent create extra waste, because when you buy something in a shopping mall, you actually already have the packagings. So from that packagings is already one kind of waste, because when you go back to house, you will throw. Just take example, instant noodles. If you have buy an instant noodles, inside there are one small packagings. After a 5 pack, it have one big packagings. So if you buy in a shopping malls and shopping mall give you the plastic bag that is extra and other packagings. So from before you would like to cook a pack of instant noodles, you've been create actually 3 plastic waste. Okay. So if you didn't take the final ones, you only create the 2. So that's why we need to try to reduce the toxicity, or we try to recreate some things that how can we repackings our instant noodle packings maybe, or what else we can use to replace. So when we say about reuse, if you taking the plastic bag, okay, so have you tried to reuse it after that, or you will just directly throw it away? So somebody's, I'm sure you will take it as a rubbish bag. Okay, so you will throw and reuse it. So that one is one term of the reuse. And then if you use the current one is like the shopping bags, the canva bags, then you can reuse many times. So that's one is also one of it. And then finally only you recycle it. All right. Okay, so these are the pyramids. So the pyramid should be the upside down. The most preferred one is actually the preventions. The less preferred one is the disposal. Okay, we would like to do the up one. So prevent, reduce, and recycling. Okay, try to avoid to create extra solid rubbish. But then if you cannot, then you try to reduce it and then reuse it and then only go to the recycling. Okay, right. So these are those changes that cause us the changes in the solid waste management is because we due to the urbanizations or industrializations. Last time, if you ask your parents or even your grandparents, if they go to buy fish or other things, what people use to wrap, they might tell you using banana leaf or using newspaper. But then now everybody's saying that newspaper is dirty because you have all those black color ink printed on it. So it's not safe. Okay. So it's something that the changes or the increase of the solid waste or in the content in the ratio is actually coming from our living style, coming from us. So the change you will see the population change in the waste characteristic. So the rapid development and the standard of living will cause all these things happens. And then it will happens that when the populations are increased and then the waste also will increase. Okay. So and then but there are some things that goods. We have others than cons that are also improved. So the good thing is by having the industrialization, so we have more technologies. Those technologies allow us to have more modern technique to actually help us to recover the energies that having inside. Okay, so as examples, those plastic bag, those biodegradable plastic bag, if you go to buy the plastic bag, you actually can feel the difference. Someone is maybe more soft, one is more harder, more stronger. So those biodegradable plastic bag, do you know where the plastic come? The raw materials from the plastic is coming from petroleums. So those plastic bag by using pyrolysis process is actually something that we can retrace it back, taking back the oil. So when we receive that petrols, maybe we can do something else. Okay, all right. So those high-rise buildings, supermarkets or hypermarkets are actually also is a changes that contribute to the solid waste. If you go to the normal pasar, go to the normal markets, they won't have so much of packaging. If you want to buy a fish, then it's just a fish inside the plastic big bag. That's all. But if you go to the Tesco, Maiden, C-Mart, those hypermarket or supermarket, the fish is actually putting inside a polystyrene and then wrapped with wrapping plastic and then only put into the plastic bag for you. So there are different layers. Okay, right. So the points that we should be considered are how we're going to reduce the waste generation. So first we need to reduce in the raw material consumptions. But then when we reduce in the raw material consumptions, the job opportunity will be decreased. So how are we going to balance between the economies and also the environmental? And then also we need to increase the rate of the recovery or reuse the waste materials. Okay. In Malaysia, there's one thing that for me is quite strange because we cannot recycle our glass bottles. Okay. Um. However, for overseas country, they are usually they can recycle their glass bottles. So those glass bottle, you actually after you wash, you can immediately directly reuse it. Okay. So the points for us to consider is actually the materials flow in the societies, and then the reductions in the raw material usage, reuse the material, material recovery, energy recovery, and then day-to-day solid waste management, right? Okay. So the factors that affecting the generations rate is actually is if we compare Malaysians to the even if we compare to Singapore or to Japan's or to Europe or USA countries, the waste generations in Malaysia is actually quite small, and that is quite common because why? Our population also not as high as them. Okay, so the quantity of the waste generated is usually influenced by the several factors. So first is the climate conditions. If you go to a cold country and also a hot countries, then it will be different, right? So the collection service, those that comings to help you to collect your solid waste also may contribute. If your place, the trucks that comes to collect come every day, so the waste that you generate might be different. And then some social economics activities such as like sometimes we're having like night markets or some fun fairs, so it will having more solid waste created. And then extend on the salvagings and recycling. So if you do a lot of recycling, you separate your waste into a very detailing, then your waste that you actually throw to the landfill is actually in a small amount. And then the public attitude, how you take it, how you feel it, what is your awareness. So, and then finally is the legislations. And then also if we say back to the climatic conditions, is also go back to the season. So when you see sometimes when we coming to let's say New Year or Hari Raya, so all of these are actually we will start to cleaning our house, so we will throw a lots of things. Okay, right? So, and then, I just going to touch about more detailing into the collection system. So the factors that might be considered for the on-site storage of solid waste is the effect of the storage on the waste component, and then the types of the containers, and then where we place it, the container locations, and then public health, and also the aesthetics. Okay, when we say about the type of containers, so have you checked, usually those solid waste can or rubbish bin that you have in your house, it should comes with the cover because we need to prevent those rainwater go in. When the rainwater go in, what will happen? It will become very smelly and then it will degradable very fast, and then it will grow all those bacteria very, very fast. Okay. So here you can see the effect. So the characteristic of the waste upon storage undergo biological decompositions as a result. Remain the storage containers because the flies can breed in less than 2 weeks. So all those compounds such as hydrogen sulfate and methylene mercaptans will be produced. So you will smell some things that not nice. Okay. So the solid waste has different initial moisture content, and then it would take, so this thing we have to consider is when we're having the on-site container. And then missing waste, so the papers will absorb the moisture from the food waste and fresh garden trimming. So the longer the waste are stored until the collections, the more uniform the moisture will become distributed throughout the waste. So if the container lids are not used, waste will absorb water from rainfall and become saturated. Excuse me. Contaminations by the small amount of waste such as motor oils, household cleaner, and paints will reduce the value of the individual's components for recycling. For us, a lots of time, there are some things that we say this cannot be recycled because it's dirty. So I would advise next time when you would like to do recyclings, please wash all the things, right? Okay, so type of the containers. So the types and the capacity of the containers used are depends on the collections frequency. So how frequent they comes to collect your solid waste. So I'm sure in Malaysia is usually it's like a week. There are 3 times. So you have like 2 days one, 2 days one. Okay. So the types of the collection system, what you might be confused. Is there any system for collect? Yes. Later you will see in the next. Okay, the characteristic and the type of the solid waste to be collect. This thing didn't happen in Malaysia because we didn't separate our waste. So we didn't have a different day. But then in others country, they have the schedule such as like Sundays, they also only collect maybe for food waste. For Mondays, they are only cardboard and paper, and then for aluminum cans, for pet bottles. So they have all these things. They will collect each one off together. But then in Malaysia, we dump everything together, so that's why we didn't have this. Okay. The space that available for the placement of the container. So also we need to see, is it suitable to put such a big container in this area or not? Okay, so these are the example of the containers that we have in Malaysia actually. So the common one, our house will be this one. Okay, right. Okay, so should we place it? So the container location should depends on the types of the dwellings or commercials and industrial facilities, and then the available space and access to the collection service. And then container must be at the curb side for the collections, and then also for the aesthetic value, it must be moved or transport to the curb on the days of the collections. It's actually not a good one if we keep put our rubbish bin outside our house. Okay, so you should put inside your house, and then you put it in when the days, such as my house is like coming on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturdays. So when Tuesday only in the morning only I push it out. But then what happens in Malaysia, the trucks that coming sometimes they didn't have a schedule, so you don't know when you should put it out. That's why everybody's are putting it outside directly, because sometimes they come in 5 o'clock in the morning, sometimes they come in the afternoon, so it depends. Okay, so sometimes for the alley collections, we will put at the back of the property. So the width of the alley should be sufficient enough. Usually you will see this one for the commercials one. So if you go to some shop lots, usually this rubbish bin won't be placed in front because it's not nice. So they will put it at the back. So when the trucks come, the trucks need to go to the back road, backyard. So when they go to the back, so you have to make sure that the street at the back is actually wide enough for them to pass through. Okay, so finally is for the multifamily housing unit or apartments building. So the quantity of waste is large. So the container is actually located at the basement of the building. So sometimes you have a place that you can throw, or you need to bring it down to the big areas. Okay. So, and then the smaller container may be mounted on the rollers to facilitate the movement from the storage to the collections vehicles. Right. So solid waste collections and transport, while the disposal is the most pressing problems, usually we only always looking into like, we only say that, oh yeah, because landfill taking a lot of our land, so it's the most expensive. We would like to have a land that we can do it as a landfill. Okay. However, we never consider on the collections. Have you ever think about those trucks that come in? You never pay them. So why they need to come and collect your rubbish? When they didn't come to collect, you will scold, you will angry. But have you ever think how much you pay them? Have you ever paid to that services? Okay. So this is why for those housing at the village, they actually didn't have this service, because those money that you pay for your I need to mention in Malay cukai pintu. Okay, that one is actually paying for these services. Okay, so the cities in Malaysia and those the developing nations collections operations are highly labor and capital intensive. Yes, we are still highly labor. So you can see after this you can check how many persons come to collect. I'm sure usually it's about three, one driver and then two staff that will pull your rubbish bin and then hang it on the trucks. Okay, so the accessibility problem due to the poor building layout, road congestions, and physical infrastructure also will elaborate the problems. When they have to make a lots of turn, then the cost will increase because the trucks need the petrols or diesels to move. Okay, so the collections frequency is actually determined by the amounts of the waste that to be collected, or also the waste characteristic, climate cost, and public request. So in Malaysia, for the residence area, usually is once in every 2 days. But then some place maybe go for every day, so it depends. But then for communal centers, it will comes daily. Those communal centers mean the residence area, the commercial area, or those place that having a community center. So you will generate a lot of waste. So they need to come every day, such as market. If you go to market, there are one big one. So usually they will come and collect every day. Okay. So for the collections of the solid waste that contain the food waste, the maximum period shouldn't longer than the normal time of the accumulations that can be placed in container of a reasonable size, the times that take the fresh garbage to purify and then emit the odors. And then the length of the fly to breedings is about less than 7 days. So you don't want to create a house or place for those flies or others microorganisms, right? So these are the frequency that you can check and read by yourself. Okay, so these are three collections methods. So first we have the curbside or alley pickup, where it's a commons. The trucks, the lorries will come in and then collect house by house. And then this is actually the quickest and economical by using the standard containers. So the crew only empty the container into the vehicles, and then the owners will usually put it back to your place, okay, or return it back to the storage area. You just send it out and then put in front of your house. Okay. Second is set out and set back collections. This one, if your street, the road in front of your house is very narrow, so they will usually only pass by the main road outside. So you have to send all these things to outside. Okay. Or sometimes you might see these workers, they may be having something like in a hurry, so they might come to your house and then collect everybody's one and then put it outside. Okay, so this eliminate the most disadvantage of the curve method, but the collectors need to enter the private properties, so they have to set out crew and carries the full container from the residence, so they have to move off, which is set up, and then after they unload to the trucks, they have to set it back, which is they have to send it back. Okay, Backyard one is for the aesthetic values because at the back, so it's more nicely. Somebody's house, the rubbish can is actually at the back. Okay, so it's convenience to the house owner, but then it's quite costly. Okay, and then the collector also sometimes need to collect the waste from a few houses using a big, large containers, and then only dump into the collections vehicles. Okay, so and then when it comes to collects, there are two types of the collection system. We have two types. One is stationary container system. This is usually for our residents and commercials. And then secondly, we have the whole container system, SCS and also HCS. For HCS, we have two methods. One is conventional method and then one is exchange container mode. Then you will see it detailedly in the figures after this. This is help you to identify which one is more economically. When you after this, when if you go to work in this kind of company, then you will know how to plan. Okay. Okay, so for SDS, it's actually the system which the container used to store the waste will remain at the point of the generation, just like our house. The rubbish can of your house will stay, and then except when it moves to the curb or other locations to be empty. So you only move it out to the roadside to be empty. So the usually the type of the SCS is they will use a mechanically loaded system. So it needs some spec, all the manually loaded. Okay, last time is usually mainly the manually loaded, and then now it's mechanically. So you will have some things, you will hang at that and then haul it inside and then compact. Okay, so usually this one we will use for the residential and also commercial side. And then it will use the vehicles with the internal compactions so that you can compact it into more. Okay. Then from this figure, you can see, so this one is mean the empty lorry. So the empty lorry will dispatch out from the place, from their parking car parks, okay? And then come to your house, everywhere, and then collects, okay? Pick it up. And then if it is full, then it will send to the landfill. And then going back again, pick it up and send it. And then go and come back, all right? And then go back to the parking, okay? So these are the examples that usually used for the stationary container system. Okay, this one is actually this is mainly all available except this type we didn't have in Malaysia. Okay, this is all from Idaman. I'm taking from Idaman's one. Okay, this is the common one. And then sometimes you have this. This is for the agriculture waste or all those debris after you cut your trees. Then these trucks will come to help you to pick up. Okay, this is for recycle. Okay, so for whole container system, the system is which the container will use for storage the waste will hold to the disposal side. When we say hold, it means the tarik, okay? It will pull everything empty and return to the original locations or some others locations. And then it is more suitable to remove the waste where the generations rate is high. So the types of the containers, usually we have the hose truck or tail frame container. Okay, so these are the ones. So those empty trucks, okay, so this is the conventionals. Now we look into the conventionals method first. So an empty trucks without a containers will collect a container loaded with refuse or with the solid waste. And then the container is hauled by truck to the disposal site. And then after the refill is unloaded, the truck would send the empty container to the original place. Okay, so you see at this photo. So from the landfill site, the trucks will go without anything. And then when it reach one place, then it will bring those food coming to the landfill and then go back again. Okay, because when it takes that things, because it go without anything, okay, so it when it go and take, then here we didn't have any container anymore. So after it unloads to the landfill, it has to send it back. And then only with the empty, no container, it moves to the next place and then take it and send. empty, and then bring it, send back. Send the empty one back, and then coming back to the car park again, right? Okay. Second one is a exchange container mode. So a trucks will go to the locations point with an empty container. So the container was placed at the site and the trucks will haul a container fully loaded with refuse to a disposal site. So after emptying, the truck would go to another collections point and the process is repeated. Okay, for exchange container, when the trucks go, it will goes with together with empty container. It carries together with the empty container. So it will leave the empty container there and then brings the full one go to the landfill. So after unload, the full one will be empty and then it will goes to the second. Come back with the full and then unloads, go with the empty and then come back with the full. Right? Okay, so these are the typical ones. So it's something that you can pull it up, okay? Is more a bigger size one. Usually you will see this at the market and then all those high-rise building apartments or some place that under the constructions. Okay, right. So next we will go into the transfer and transport. If you still remember just now at the starting, the simplified diagram, there are one transfer and transport that I mentioned to you is about transfer station. You need to have one place to change, like an interchange, okay, transit stations, right? So refers to mean facility and accessory used to effect the transfer of waste from relatively small collections vehicles to a large vehicles and transport for the processing or disposal. Some place the big trucks maybe cannot go in, so they need to use by a small one. But then if you're using a small one, it may be, if you're counting the cost, may not be economically worth. So they need to transfer. So they need a one place to transfer from the small one to the biggest one. Okay. It is not always economically to haul the solid waste directly to the disposal site in the collections vehicle. So in this case, the refuse is transferred from several collections vehicles to a larger collections, which then carry it to the disposal site. So the largest vehicles may be a tractor trailers, railroad cars, or baggage. A special facility, we call it as a transfer station, must be constructed to permit this action in a rapid and sanitary fashions, right? So this is the process. Okay, start from your household. The compactor or truck will come. Sometimes it will go directly to the landfills, but then sometimes because the journey is too far, if 100 kilometers is not worth it for you to send it directly, right? So you will send to a transfer station and then it will compact and into silo and then go to the landfill. Okay. So why we need these transfer operations? Because the transfer and transport operations become a necessity when the whole distance to disposal site or material recovery facility is no longer economically feasible. Just imagine if your house, the place that they collect, and the landfill having a journey about 50 kilometers or 100 kilometers. So one day, if you just go, come and collect and send, and then you would like to come back for second time, definitely no. So it cannot go for two trips, okay? So they also become necessity when the disposal site are site in a remote area or disposal site is not accessibility by the collections vehicles. Okay. So these are the factors. If you would like to apply the transfer operations, what are the factors that might be influenced? So first you have to consider when you're having a transfer, when it's go too long, the driver is actually calculate by trips. So they want to get more trips in a day. So it might happen the illegal dumpings due to the excessive haul distance. And then the locations of the disposal site relatively far from the collections route when it is more than 16 kilometers. So the use of the capacity, small capacity collections vehicle generally is less than 1.3 meter cube. And then also the existence of the low density residential service area. If that areas you only have 10 houses, so it's not worth is the big trucks come just to collect and then go back. Okay. Right. So what is transfer stations? Transfer stations are used to accomplish the transfer of the solid waste from collections to other small vehicles to a larger transport equipment. So depending on the method that used, there are three methods. So one is a direct load, second is a storage load, and then lastly is a combine between the direct load and also the storage discharge load. So the factors that you need to consider when you would like to design a transfer stations. First, what kind of the transfer operations that you would like to do. Second is the capacities that requirement you need. The size is either big size or small size, equipment and accessories, and then the environmental requirement, and also finally is the locations. So first, you want a direct discharge or storage discharge or a combined one. Okay, so you have to identify this. So these are the types. So direct loaded means when the silos coming in, the truck will directly coming in. Storage means it will put inside open areas to store first and then only slowly compact. Or you have two together. When there are lorry available, then you can discharge direct. If there is no any container available, then you will store it. Okay, there are three types. Okay, so the capacities, how big is your place? So you need to know the you shouldn't let the collections vehicles wait too long to unload, and then you have to compare the cost of the larger size with the time of the waitings. Is it economically worth for it? Okay. So equipment and also the accessories are requirements. So these are the elements that we have. The scale should be provided at the mediums and large transfer station because we need to make sure that the in and out is on the balanced one. So we have the hoppers, compactor, and also the front loaders, right? Then the environmental requirements. Who want to stay or live together with the solid waste? You will feel it's smelly. So you need to find a place that is actually enclosed area. And then the stations are constructed with the materials that easily to clean and maintain because you need to wash every day. If not, it will be very, very smelly. Okay. And then you need to use the windscreen or barriers or blue papers to cover the surroundings, and then you can't accumulate the waste in a big quantity. Okay, and then locations where we would like to choose, where we would like to put in. So for sure it's as near as possible to the center of individual solid waste productions areas. So it's for sure that you need to close to the areas, and then it's also not far from the solid waste from the landfill, and then you need to have an easy access, and then it needs to be minimum public and environmental objections. For sure, if it's close to your house, you will object, you will say this is no. Okay, so the constructions and operationals cost most economically, and then you have to calculate because it's everything on money, right? So for the transport means and methods, okay, so the most common means to use to transport waste from transfer stations are trailers, semi-trailers, and compactors, okay? So just now you see it's like a silo size. Okay, so the vehicles that use, if you would like to go onto the highway, it need to meet certain requirements, okay? The waste must be transported at the minimum cost. The waste must be covered during the whole operations. Vehicle must be designed for highway traffic. And then the method used for unloading must be simple and dependent, such as self-emptying. Okay. Sometimes you might see all these lorry actually on the highway. If you when you're driving along towards until along the Penang's area estate. Okay, so sometimes you might see. I will show you the photos and the transfer station in the next lectures. Okay, when we talk about landfill, I will show you. Right. Okay. So thank you, and that's all for our chapter 9 for the solid waste. Okay. So If you want a clean earth, you want a green earth as the photo, then you have to clean our earth first. You have to learn how to clean our earth. You have to learn how to separate the waste, right? So thank you for all of your listening. So if you have any questions, you are welcome to ask me through any channels, through emails, through WhatsApp, or any chat rooms that you can contact me anytime. All right. All right. So thank you all. And then I will see you again in the next chapter. Bye.